Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Deb Sletmone. I'm here today to talk to you about 1099s. I believe my official title is 1099 Do's and Don'ts, but I'm going to tell you most of the things that I do. I don't know if I have a lot of don'ts, except for make sure you get them done. Don't forget them. Every once in a while, somebody will call in March saying, "I think I forgot that." So don't forget them. That'd be a good don't. Well, guys, let's go ahead and let's talk about things that we want to make sure we're doing. And really, this is my overall generating 1099s. I'll forward the full slide deck. So there's a lot of information on these slide decks. So definitely want to make sure that you have all of this information. And I'm going to walk through most of this in the screens as well so you can see it. But of course, like right now, we're in the crunch because all of our miscellaneous or box 7 1099s are due for filing by January 31st, right? So if you have people that have gotten miscellaneous non-employee compensation over the last year, you need to make sure you get a 1099 out to them by January 31st and also file it if you file paper or if you file electronic. Remember, that's also due at the end of January, which is, we've had that now for a couple of years, right? But making sure those 1099s are mailed and filed by the end of the month is something that a lot of people forget, especially if you're used to being an electronic filer where you had until end of March. Now everything again is January 31st. Okay, so we really want to make sure all the way throughout the year, if you haven't put it in play already, make sure that throughout the year you are, as you create a new vendor record, that you are also making sure that you are getting all the proper documents, right? You are getting the information filled out that you need to make sure that you're in compliance for that filing of the 1099, right? So getting the correct information from them. And if you have a verification source, making sure that you're running them through there as well. Okay, so as you're setting up and creating your new vendors, make sure that you're asking for that now. Don't forget about EFT as well, getting the EFT information if you're starting to process payments electronically for your vendors as well. So guys, here's one of our screens. When we look at generating 1099s, this is just an overall setup screen. And if you notice, the path is listed right here: tools, setup, purchasing, payables, and then 1099 setup window. So if you're ever wondering, do I have the right thresholds? Okay, if you notice, I'm clicking on the 1099 setup button, and then I'm going over to my tax type, and then I can see my minimum amount for all of them. Okay, so don't forget about where this window is at. And if you're wondering on a window, maybe you thought that a vendor should have had a 1099, this window, if you have a threshold set incorrectly, could also be a problem. Okay. One good thing that I always try to do is use my note at the window level to put in instructions. So whether I want the W-9 before all payments, I want to put vendors on hold before payments can be released, making sure that I have that W-9 and the W-9 on file, right? Making sure those notes and procedures are put in is one of my favorite things to use those window level notes for. I could even add attachments there so people have the current W-9, or don't forget, you have the smart list capability of sending out W-9s with the right letter piece as well. So let's go ahead, and I know they only gave us a half an hour today, which if you've seen me do this one before, you know I really need about 2 hours to do it. So I'm going to move through quite quickly, but lots of good things here, okay? Don't forget, when you are setting up your vendors, make sure that if they are set to be a 1099, that your 1099 address will come to life. If they have a different address location for their 1099, you want to make sure that you note it here, because this is the address that it's going to use as it prints the 1099. At the same time, making sure that the legal name versus the check name. If someone fills out their W-9, they give you an SSN versus a federal ID number, but they give you a business name instead of a person's name. The name needs to match the number. So I always know when I get an SSN and a business name that that is going to come back to me when I file my when I file my 1099s. So make sure that you understand when they're listing an SSN, a social security number, or a federal ID number, and the implications when it comes to the W-9s. Don't forget about your right letters and really customizing that right letter. I'll show you that when we get into product, because you know me, I don't stay in PowerPoint very long, okay? So I'll show you a few of those and how I do them today to make 1099s a lot easier, okay? I love the 2 user-defined boxes because I use those to make sure that I know when the last time I sent that company a W-9 and if I've gotten an updated W-9 from them. You have those 2 user-defined fields. You can name them and label them in your payable setup. Okay. Green Shades also pulls, so if you're using Green Shades, it can pull from some of these user defines and from your comment 1 and 2 that's on the first screen, and I'll show you those. Okay. So some different tips for just overall generating. SmartList can be very helpful, but make sure that you're verifying the information in your SmartList. If you're just using the SmartList that's based on last close date and you're really not consistent on when you're closing, be careful with some of those because that could give you some incorrect information, okay? Again, making sure that things like your cash management or your bank transactions, if you have put in transactions that are for a vendor into bank, remember, those don't update the payables 1099 amount, okay? So we also want to make sure that we're checking our bank transactions, running through all of our cash management ones, which we can run a smart list on. Same time, making sure we know how many forms, if we're still printing forms, and making sure that we have all of our vendors' information, including if we mark them to be at 1099, making sure that we have that 1099 number on file for them. SmartList Builder, there's tons of information in the slide deck on SmartList Builder. SmartList Designer is going to work close to the same way. If you need our help for that, let us know. Okay. And again, this one's just walking you through how to make sure that you know what the 1099 amounts by period are and to be able to accumulate those to get your correct amount on the 1099s in a SmartList, because I know a lot of you still really like SmartList and putting information into Excel to do some additional tie-outs. Okay, this one's just walking back through that again. So I'm not going to step through all of that for time's sake today, but remember, there's great instructions in the slide deck. So just make sure you get the slide deck. If you have any trouble getting it, let me know and I will be happy to send it over direct. Okay, so again, just some different things on generating 1099s here and the smart list. And remember, sometimes those smart lists, if you're looking at one and it doesn't tie out, make sure that your voids are turned on or off, because sometimes voids are automatically included, but yet we don't want those included in our totals, okay? Okay, let's jump into product here a little bit because there's some favorite things I want to make sure that you guys all get to see, okay? So a couple things that you heard me talk about so far was when I was on a vendor and looking at that vendor, looking at that 1099 address. Now, if you notice here on mine, the 1099 address is not available because number one, I don't have a vendor up yet. But as I move a vendor in, I can immediately tell that that vendor is 1099 because I see the address. I don't need to go all the way back to the options because I know if I can see that it is a 1099 vendor. Just a quick tip there as far as looking at a vendor. At the same time, remember those 2 user defines. In this company, I have them set a little bit different, but you can set these 2 labels underneath your setup in purchasing. At the same time, my tax type here and my default box are going to be used at the transaction level. Remember, those are defaults. So if you have a vendor that you're paying 2 items for, let's say rent under box 1, and you're also paying them underneath miscellaneous non-employee comp, this is going to default from that setup. You can still adjust it though to not have a miscellaneous interest or dividend, or to have a correct box number, or to not have an amount at all. okay? So if your users aren't trained on the differences in the boxes or the differences in when something should be 1099 and when it's not, this is a good time to spend a little bit of time with them on understanding the amount for a vent or for a sorry, the amount for a vendor coming in is going to default in. However, if the vendor is not set up correctly, like here, this whole $100 is going right over into my 1099 amount. Guys, hold on one second. We just heard that we have a technical difficulty we're trying to fix. Sorry about that, guys. I just heard that you guys weren't able to see my screen when I switched between PowerPoint and GP. Please forgive me. I think we have it working again. Just gonna double check here. I think everything is back. So I'm just gonna walk back through that quickly so you guys can see it. I so apologize. We were looking at that vendor screen where the 1099 amount was. We also were looking at that options, looking at that 1099, the boxes here, and the two user-defined fields. Okay, so in case you haven't seen those. At the same time, we just quickly switched over to transactions purchasing, looking at that transaction amount where the purchases amount came into the 1099 amount. Okay, and again here, it's going to put all of that $100 into miscellaneous and non-employee comp because that's where my default was set. But if really only $50 of it was supposed to be there, then this amount would need to be adjusted. Okay, just some things that sometimes as you may get new people to your team, they may not understand what is the default is going to bring over the entire amount, okay, and the box number. So kind of keep those ones in mind. Okay. Now, at the same time, when it comes to looking at what's going into my 1099s, if you really are struggling to figure out where are these amounts coming from, this is one of my favorite windows, and I will tell you, I use this window all the time. If a customer calls me and says, I can't figure out, this number does not make any sense to me, I go here first. It's my first thing that I do before I start pulling any smart list, any report. I go edit 1099, I bring up the vendor, and then I start looking to see what has been included in the 1099 debit, all debits, or all credits. Okay, so right now the 1099 debit for the current year that I'm on, of course, okay, so you could even put in some dates here to restrict down your window. But if you notice here, all of these amounts are included in box 7 in miscellaneous. If you haven't tried this window on yours and you have a vendor that you're like, okay, some of it just doesn't look right, it shows you right away what's been included. Now, if I switch over to all debits for this vendor, I would see anything that also was paid to the vendor, but may not be included in my 1099 transaction, okay? This, like I said, is one of my favorite windows. Now, if I know that this should have been box 1, that this should have been a rent, I could go ahead and make that change right here and then process it through, okay? I will tell you this window saves so much time, especially if you have classified something incorrect. Great audit report as well to go in the file, but it's a nice, easy one. And again, transactions purchasing, and then all the way down to that edit 1099 transaction information, okay? Now, let's go ahead and let's take a peek at tools, routines, and purchasing. And let's talk through some of the items that we should be doing right now as we prep to create those 1099s. If you notice, I haven't done anything on my year-end closing yet because you know me, I might still be doing a few last-minute things and not ready to close payables, but I still can be working on my 1099s. I can go ahead here in routines purchasing and print 1099s. And when I do that, if you notice here, I've got all of my information filling in for my company card and my company setup. If your federal ID number, your FIN, isn't here, make sure you add it back in your company setup, in your overall setup, to make sure you have it there for future use. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my really fun federal ID number there that's completely made up. And I want to make sure that I'm printing my 1099s for the right year as well. When I come into this part, I can go ahead and use my print button here at the top to get a good edit list and see how many 1099s, how many forms I'm going to need, or to take a look and see what I may need to start working on, okay? Just gives me a handy little report. Let's go back. Sorry, guys, I forgot I'm on this company that has some older information here, so I'm just jumping back for a second. So, so we always get the best data when we're on these demos. You know that, right? Okay, so we're going to print our edit list. Once we print our edit list, then we're going to go ahead and use our print form and making sure everything there is correct before we print our forms. We also have the ability here to use our 1096 to print our 1096 at the end to be able to file that if you are a paper filer. If you're not a paper filer, you're going to need something like a green shades to do your electronic filing, because remember, GP doesn't have the electronic filing included for the 1099s, okay? Not like it does for payroll. So kind of keep that one in mind as well. Now there's lots of other spots that you do go to take a look at what's included in 1099 details. So some of these older ones that still work. So if I have a vendor and I bring the vendor up, I'm going to be able to see in my 1099 details as well. This one's just giving you more of that bigger picture, like what's in the year and in this specific month. If I did need to make changes, I could make changes here as long as I'm on a month view versus a yearly view, okay? So just another way to look at the 1099. So here, if you notice, I've got Ace Travel for 2017, and in 2017, he had a miscellaneous non-employee comp, $50, okay, in the full year. So he still may not get a 1099 because he just does not have enough. He has not hit the threshold yet. So let's put him at $750. Okay, we'll save on that one. We're in 2017 here. I'm just getting a few more here so you guys can see them. Okay. Oopsie. I'm going to go back here on Polar and non-employee comp, 900. Remember, if I'm not over that 600, I'm not going to get any 1099s to print. Okay. Let's go back. Let's take a look at our 1099. And I was doing those in 2017 because, you know, I'm just really not ready for 2020 yet. So I'm staying 2017 a little bit longer here. I'm going to use my printout again here to show you on this one. And now you can see there's my two vendors. Okay, so now on yours, these should be already accumulated for the year for 2017. And I would just really want to show you that you don't need to close in order to see what you have already listed here. Okay, you can see the 1099 amount. You can see some of that base information here. Okay, at the same time, if I go over to my print forms and use my printer here, now you're seeing the individual forms that are printed, and I can print, line up, however you like to do your alignment. Okay, so guys, I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions. So definitely remember to put your questions in the question pane and see if there's things that we can help with, areas that you're really having some struggles on. So maybe you need to get a vendor into a window. Okay, so let's take a look. I don't see any questions out right now, and I know Brandon's helping me watch for questions as well. Thanks, Brandon. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my vendor, And I want to take a look at a vendor that we know is not a 1099 vendor, okay? So you can see this Allenson Properties and Advanced Office, both not 1099s. Let's take a look and see where we can pull those up, okay? So I'm going to go back here to my edit transaction information, and let's just take a look and see what we got. Well, right away, this window says, hey, they're not a 1099 vendor. I can't even look at their transactions here until I make them into a 1099 vendor, okay? So guys, kind of keep in mind that if you're struggling with using some of these windows and they're not working for you, it may be that your vendors aren't set correctly, okay? So as you're setting up those new vendors, make sure that you're setting them to the correct type and box. And then as I come back and take a look at Allenson now, I'm going to be able to pull them up. He's not going to have any 1099 debits yet because really, we just made him into a 1099 vendor. I can look at all of the debit transactions, and I can see here that I had one. I'm going to change him to a miscellaneous because I believe he should have been a miscellaneous vendor and set up. And then, of course, I better make sure I have an SSN for him, or sorry, a federal ID number. And I'm going to take a look at that back here again on my tax registration. So you can see he's going to have some issues on his 1099 because he's not going to have a tax ID entered in the system. So some things to watch out for. I'm going to go ahead and process through here, and let's switch back to our smart list for just a second. Okay. When I'm looking at my smart list for 1099s, there's so many things I can do, and I know all of you have different ways that you really like to work with your 1099s. I will tell you, I like to start looking at my overall vendors. And remember, when I'm in my 1099 window, I'm just increasing my width here a little bit by using my right click to come in here and take a look at my 1099 vendors. Okay, this one's an out of the box, so I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to take a look at, here's all of my vendors that I have set up to be 1099. Well, of course, I want to see that tax ID. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add that tax ID in. Okay, I'm going to find that and say okay. Okay, when I'm here, you can see that, oh boy, I might have some issues. I've got a lot of them that don't have tax ID numbers, right? If I had dollars in these for dollars 1099s to print, this could be a struggle for me because I need to get these updated pretty quickly. I may want to use my smart list button here and, use my Word button here and do a quick vendor letter and get some requests out for some updated W-9s. Okay, so right now, remember guys, I'm just on my smart list. And some of you that haven't used this one before, it's just your Word button when you're on a smart list. And then you can come into any of your letter templates, and it's going to go ahead and see all of those guys that you have up on your list, and next again, and I'm going to be able to go ahead and print all those 1099s. So if you haven't played with that one, definitely play with that one. That one is really fun. Okay. At the same time, you know, we're in a panic, guys. We've only got a couple weeks left before we've got to get these filed. I may need to add some phone numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my phone number too. Okay. And of course, my telephone number is escaping me here because that's, you know, kind of my fun today. Let's go to phone, because usually if I'm on one, it's on the other. There's my phones, okay? Phone number 1, phone number 2, depending upon how you have yours set, you can drop all 3 of them in so you can get all of the numbers you need and be able to make some quick phone calls, okay? So don't forget, guys, when you're using the smart list, your drill back is there. You can also attach those right here through your doc attach. Okay, so when I'm using my doc attach, I'm going to be able to put those updated W-9s here. So when I get into, let's say, a state unemployment audit, any of the audits that are going to ask for those updated W-9s, you have them right here at your fingertips. Oh, gotta close this one first. So I say for W-9s, it's the best place to put them. You have them there. You can do a quick smart list and be able to double click, get all the information you need back on those as well. Okay. Okay, the other thing I will say is after you've looked at your vendors, and I usually do this one in reverse. I'll usually do the search and I'll say, show me all of my vendors where it is equal to a not 1099 vendor. And I'll proof through this list just to make sure that I haven't paid someone dollars that is set up as a not 1099 type, making sure that we haven't missed someone, okay? At the same time, don't forget you do have the ability to come in and I just create what's called that 1099 review, looking at all vendors that I've paid money and what those payments were, so I can even restrict down to a specific doc type. I can drop this whole thing right to a pivot table and look at each vendor and really start narrowing down using that filter 1099 type. Okay, that one's listed in the handout as well. So don't forget, guys, that's a really fun one to look at. What were the dollars paid, the doc type. If you struggle with a pivot table, let me know. I definitely can walk you through that one as well. So I see a couple more questions coming in. So thanks, guys, for putting some questions in. One of my favorites here, Karen, is asking about how do you adjust that printing? You know, when the 1099s just aren't printing correctly. Great question, Karen. Let's just take a quick peek at that as well, because I know that's one that a lot of you struggle with. And I just worked with one of my absolute favorites the other day. And when we went from printing from year to year, she wrote down all of her print settings. So that way we put in the exact settings she used the year before. And you know what? They printed perfect the first time. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use my printer to go to the screen here, or go to the printer here, so you can actually see this window come up. Okay. And I'm going to say, okay, here. And guys, on this window, what you're seeing is I have the ability to pick that printer. And once I pick that printer and I hit print again, typically I'm seeing one more, but I probably got the wrong window up. So let me try one more time here, guys. Sorry about that. You're seeing the ability to adjust with your plus minus on the pre-printed form here. So sorry, I printed an edit list last time, forgive me. So here is where you see that pre-printed form options. And again, if you save these settings from year to year, you can go ahead and just put in that same setting. Pluses are going to move you to the right and down, and minuses are going to move you the opposite, up and to the left. Now remember, typically when we're putting in numbers here, we're putting in very small increments. So like a 0.10 is going to push me down just a tiny bit, okay? A minus 0.1 is going to move my print just up a tiny bit as well, okay? So if you haven't played with those, definitely you'll need to watch. Sometimes they'll hold the setting and you want to make sure that you aren't already adjusting before you start printing, okay? Once I hit my print here, it's going to go to my printer. Then I can just hold it up, make sure that it's printing correctly, and away I go. Great question, Karen. Thanks for sending that one in. If your settings aren't going back to zero, there is a place you want to just make sure. I've seen that a few times where settings aren't going back to zero. You just want to make sure as you're coming in, go ahead and print again. Is what I found is I'll print again with my settings set to zero, even just telling it just to go through the motion of doing it, just a blank paper. And keep me posted if that's not clearing your setting out, okay? Because I have seen that happen, and we can go into, there's a couple different files that adjustment is held at, and you can go in and adjust that setting. Anyone else have problems with that not holding the correct setting? Great questions. Okay. Also have different options in your print preferences here as well. So if they aren't printing correctly in the plus minuses, we may need to look at some of your additional settings too. So guys, I apologize. We're running low on time. Hopefully everyone has gotten a few good tips and tricks out of today's session. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're here to help on anything from green shades, 1099s, W-2s, 1095s. Don't forget about some of our cool tools, our summary recount, that can really help with those 1099 year-end issues, or W-2, or sorry, the vendor issues for 1099s and total amounts paid for the current year. Thanks everyone so much. Let us know if there's things that we can do to help. Email me with questions as well that we didn't get a chance to answer during our session today, and look forward to chatting with you guys all again on another webinar soon. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.